Hello everybody, and welcome to yet another door tutorial. I'm sorry that this seems to be all that I crank out when it comes to Unreal. But I have learned a lot, and I wanted to update the way that we're doing this. Because previously in my other tutorials I talked about how to do it with matinees, and that did work and it was very simple, but when you wanted to add a lot of doors you had to do a lot of matinees, and that's just, I don't feel like that's as efficient as it could be. So I came up with a new, different way of doing it. Now these assets don't matter. None of this matters. This is all just what I'm going to be using to help showcase the way things work. You can use any assets you like, and you can make this work any way you'd like. I'm going to be doing a sliding door style, like an elevator, because that's what I'm working towards. And so basically, we're going to set it up so that this checks when you're inside of it. When you interact with it, it'll change the static mesh here to show that it's been activated. The doors will open. There's another box trigger in here that's going to wait for you to stand still before it closes in your face. Also, what we're going to be setting up is, sometimes people try to break games, and you want to make sure you minimize that. If they try to leave, the doors will open back up before they finish closing. And I did want to also let you know that all three of these doors and locks are two blueprints rather, the lock and the door, duplicated over with very minimal programming or blueprints to adjust the way they work based on an index. So we're going to be doing all of that, and this is going to be a little complicated, but we'll try and keep it simple. We're going to be using blueprint interfaces and custom actors. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to a brand new program and get started. Okay, now that we are in our fresh new third person template, there's nothing going on, nothing special. We can't do anything. We're just in the regular old template. So what we're going to do now is we're going to first open up our character. Let's pull that over, and then we're going to go to the project settings. And what we want to do is we want to add the ability to interact with the doors. So we want to add an action mapping. I'm going to call this use or interact or use item. And for me, it's going to be E on the keyboard or left face button on the gamepad, like square or X on it, like a PS4 or Xbox controller, to interact with something. And then, well, we could have made a fresh character, but it doesn't matter right now. We're just here for the door. Excuse me. So what we're going to do, we're going to bring that in, use item. So now, we also want to be able to say, can we use this item? So depending on how complicated your game is or whatever you're making is, you don't want, if you have one input doing multiple things, you want to put like a check system on it. So we're going to create two variables, one that says, can we use this item? And then the other saying, yes, it's okay, go ahead and use that item. So now we're going to say, if we can use this item. So by bringing up the branch real quick, you just press B on your keyboard and click, and it will bring up the if-then statement, or true, false, branch, whatever you want to call it. So we want to say, can we use the item? If we can use the item, then set use item to true. Otherwise, do nothing. And now, we're not going to use the release here. I'm getting this mixed up with something else. We're going to want to reset these. So later on, when we get to the doors, we're going to be checking if we can use it, and if we can, we want to use the item, but we also want to reset both can use and using the item. Sometimes can use gets set to false once you started using something, and that's what's going to not allow you to use another thing if you have multiple things around you. So it only gets, one item gets interacted with at a time. So what we're going to be doing is just making a custom actor that this way, this can be reached into from other blueprints and ran from elsewhere. And this is just going to be reset can use item. And this is going to set can use item to true, or we can hold control and bring out not control, alt, my bad, use item, and we want to set use item to false and set can use item to true, and this just resets whether or not you can use something. Alright, so we're pretty much done here. Now, go back to my notes. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in some assets, specifically these, so that we'll have a nice reference point for something to look at. Okay, we are back. I accidentally placed the top-down sci-fi in the wrong spot when I migrated it. You're supposed to place it in content and not the actual root. But now that it's here, we want to, okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our content. We want to add a new folder. And what we're going to call this folder is assets. You can place this wherever you want. So I'm going to call this, and then we're going to make a new blueprint class of actor type. I'm going to call this locked doors. And then we're going to create another actor called key. I usually put numbers for locked doors. And this is just so that we can, understand what's for what. This is the locked door, and this is the key for said locked door. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do first is add a static mesh. We want to make this door right door. Which one do I have? Does it need to compile? Yeah, there it is. So this is our right door. We're just going to duplicate that. We don't want that to be a child. And then we want door 1B. It doesn't really matter how it looks. Sometimes I look better like this, and they go out and in, or we want it like this. Either way it goes. This is essentially what we're going for. So now we have our doors. So now I want to go ahead and quick name them. This is the right door, and this is the. Sometimes I think I might be dyslexic. This is the left door. And now we want something that we can freely move around once we finish programming this, that the doors will end and start on. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a sphere collision. Sorry about that, I got a phone call. Now, where were we? Sphere collision, and basically what we're going to be doing with the sphere collision, and we're going to be using this to track the location of each door start and end position for the quote-unquote animation that we're going to be making. So we want to shrink this because it doesn't need to be that big. And we're going to name this one left door start point. And it's going to have the same numerical value as the initial point of the left door. So it's at 0, 0, it's at 150, and then 0. So, oops. And then we're just going to duplicate this. No, we don't want it as a child. Mouse is in the way. Left door endpoint. And we're just going to, why is this one smaller? Yeah, we'll just do that. Alright, and we're just going to move this out, and then we'll play with that in just a minute. Or, what you could do is you could move your door, and then kind of, line those up, and then place this right here, or read the values out to yourself. 300, that's what you want. Left door endpoint is 300. Boom. And then this start point was 150. So it basically moves 50 centimeters. Alright, so we're going to duplicate this. And this time it's going to be the right door start point which is 0, 0, 0. So 0, 0, 0. And then we're going to duplicate that and make the right door endpoint, which might be 150 or 50. No, it couldn't be. 150 sounds about right. Negative 150 rather. Yeah, that sounds about right. But why can't I see you? Why is it invisible? That's weird. Oh, that's why. Why were they getting smaller? That's really weird. Anyway. So now we have the door's start and end points for closing and opening. So what we want to do, we don't need any of this, is we want to make a custom event, because basically we're going to be calling this from the actual lock and not the door itself. We want to say open lock doors. And what we're going to do is we're going to move component 2, and we're going to get our left door and sequence this off because we want these both to run at the same time. And we're going to move component 2. Control W is what duplicates items. Control C obviously copy and paste, but if you just want to duplicate something, W will do it. And now that nothing is selected, Control W doesn't do anything. So it only duplicates whatever you currently have selected. So if you have 3 things selected, then it will duplicate all 3 of those things. So we want to take the right door, and now what we want to do is move the left door to its endpoint and move the right door to its endpoint. And we want to just get the location. We want to get its relative location. So basically, not in the world, but in this actor's, viewport. Where is this? And then we want it to move there, but we want it to keep its relative rotation. So get its rotation and move there. And we want this to be about over 1.5 seconds. Okay, and we want to do the same thing here. We also want to plug this into the component, because that's what we're moving. Double clicking on your node lines will add a reroute. And if you didn't know, you can pull off of reroutes to make nodes. If relative rotation isn't what you need, you can always use the other one, just to let you know. So we're just going to run both of these when open lock doors is called. So when this is called, it's going to move the left door to the left endpoint, and it's going to move the right door to the right endpoint. But what we also want is to add a box trigger like we saw in the initial showing, that checks to see if the player is still in the elevator, because this is going to be an elevator for me. But you can also, you don't have to use this part. You can use what I've shown you so far. Why can't I zero this out? Well, I guess I don't want it to be 0. 40? That doesn't matter. I like to be precise, but it really doesn't matter right now. So we're just going to try and do our best to match the size here. And we want to make it big enough to encase the player and whatever weapons they may have, because in my game they will be holding weapons. And we don't want this standing in front of the door, we want it behind it. So once the player has entered the door, that's when this becomes active. So what we want to do is on begin overlap. So this is once the player has entered its bounds, and then this is once the player has exited its bounds. We want to check what overlapped with it. So in my case, in what I'm currently working on, you're able to pick up. I'm gonna pull my notes down, make sure I can see. What I'm currently working on, you can have weapons, and we don't want our weapons. As you can see, the weapon doesn't set off the box trigger to open, and that's because in our locked doors, it is checking if the player is what overlapped with it. If it didn't, so here on end overlap, we're just going to remove that completely, and we'll see what happens when I have a weapon, another actor that enters and exits, even though I didn't. So I'm not standing in there right now, but my sword is. So it's what's going to cause the door to close, I believe. No, the door closing is actually still waiting for me, but the door opening is all good to go. So that's why we'd want to check, because otherwise any actor will do it. So if you threw like a grenade into a box trigger, and you only wanted that thing to be activated by the player, that grenade would activate that, and that's not what you want. So we're going to, this is the tutorial, so the main character is called third person character. So we are going to component cast to the third person character, and we don't need to get anything from him unless we want to get, you know, some kind of variable or function or whatever from him, but we just want to make sure that this is what overlapped with it, and that's all this is checking. And then from there, so basically what this is going to do is it's going to wait for the player to have stood inside of the box trigger for so long before closing the doors. This is, like I said, going to allow you to not make people break your game. So we're going to just set timer by event, and we're going to wait 2 seconds. And then we're going to make a custom event, and we call this should close doors. But we also want to make sure that if the player does leave, we want to cast to third person, make sure that's what passed by, and we want to say open those doors. So open locked doors. But if the player did stay standing in there for 3 seconds, we also very important, it's not looping, but we do still want to clear this timer if the player leaves the boundings within that time. So if within 2 seconds the player has left the box trigger, we want to clear that timer, and the timer should close doors. So that's what the function's name is right here. So it's going to clear that timer. But if they did stay in there, what we want to do is similar to what we did over here, and we can just duplicate most of this and just boom, right there. We want to get the rotation and the component just to make this look a little prettier. But this time we want to get it to its start point. This is the left door. Start point, there we go. And we just slot that in right there. There. And right door start point. And this is going to close the doors behind you, or in front of you, or however you would like to set it up. So let's go over this real quick one more time. We made a custom event called open lock doors. When this is called, which we will call it in a minute, it's going to open using move component 2 the left and right door to their corresponding endpoints and their relative location and selves rotation over the course of 1.5 seconds. So we're done with the locked doors. Now what we want to do is the key for the locked doors. So again, we're going to add a static mesh, and the static mesh, you can, there it is. you can use whatever you'd like, but I'm going to be using these because they're good indicators of not used and used between 07B and 07A here. So we also want to add another box trigger, and this is just to say, you know, whether or not you're within enough range to even use said thing. Also, what's fun to sometimes do is you can place your actors in the levels. So we're going to do it like this to say whether or not we can, you know, go up these stairs. And you can alter all this. We're just going to rotate this around. And this is the beauty of using this method over a matinee, is that you can just drag these wherever you want, and it's still going to open up to, I'm pointing to it like you can see in my hands, it's still going to open up to wherever these are placed. So I can move these around, and we'll do that in a minute now to get you, you know, an example. And we'll come over here, and we'll have this set up here. So what's fun is sometimes, I'm going to pull this off to the side so you can see, is you can edit them right here while they're open. I have two monitors, so I can see this. You can edit them while they're open, and then you can kind of adjust it just how you like in your specific level so that it can be interacted with. So I'm just going to move the box itself forward. And this way, it can only be interacted with from in front of it and not from behind it like it was in the showcase at the very beginning here. And we're just going to encompass it just a little bit. And this way it can be interacted with. And we're going to open it up just a bit. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we don't need any of this. Let me go back over my notes one more time. So once again, we are going to use our box trigger to get our end overlap and begin overlap. And so now we're going to be connecting a lot of the pieces. So first we're going to cast to our hero, not hero, that's what he's called in my other one, our third person character. And then what we're going to do is we're going to promote this to a variable. Third person cast, or, you know, player cast, something, you know, whatever you want to call it to help you know what it is. And we want to set a variable in here called Interactable Range. And so this is just going to be setting whether or not, you know, everything else that happens inside here, the player is able to interact with this blueprint. And so again, with the end overlap, we want to make sure that they can't. So we again want to come down here. We just want to again set this. You don't have to do this part, but I'm doing it just because. We want to set interactable range to false. Again, that's Alt and drag to get it out like that. And then we want to get our player cast, and we want to pull that custom event we made when we started, which was resetting can you use the item. So reset can use item. And we're going to get to that in just a second. We're going to get to it now. We're going to add a timeline, and this is going to say, well, this is just going to be our interactable timeline. And we're just going to make it autoplay and loop, so it's kind of like a tick, but we don't want to call tick. We just want this to run. I mean, we could also set a timer or a timeline, but this is going to be good because this is just going to be checking off of the interactable range. So nothing is going to happen until we're in range of interacting with this thing. And we could use something else for interactable range, but I think running it off of whether or not we have overlapped with the box trigger is good enough. I mean, you could run it off of, you know, the distance of the player to the actor, but this is just fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get the actor, and then we're going to see if he can use anything, and if he can, is he using it? Because what's going to happen is, that's what this is if you can use an item, it's saying can you use any items, and if you can't, go ahead and use that item. So we're going to say, well, can the player use an item? So can use item, we're going to say if the player can use an item. We're just double checking ourselves to make sure nothing runs when it's not supposed to. So if they are in interactable range and they can use an item and they have used an item, then we want to get all actors of class. We want to get the locked door. And so basically now we're going to get all the locked doors, or all the locked doors that we've named, like the one we've made here, all the ones that we've placed in the level. So we'll add a second one here. And I'm going to name this one locked door 0, and name this one locked door 1, because that's how we count here. And we're going to rotate this like this. Actually, we'll rotate it like, we'll rotate it like this. And we'll put this one here. And then we'll put another key for the door here. And let's just put a wall here. We're just kind of helping build the feeling of what we're building. So you can't get around this wall without opening the door. Yeah. Okay. It's gonna slide into this whatever. Where were we? So we're gonna get all the actors of locked door type. Now that we have more than one, that makes sense. We're going to get a copy. We want to promote. So this index is the number of locked doors, and we just want to promote that to locked door index. We're going to index that, and we want to make this visible so we can edit it out in the world right here. So this is basically which one we're going to set it up now, which one that this interacts with. So this is going to interact with locked door 0 because it counts that way, and this one is going to interact with locked door 1. And what we're going to do is pull from this and say for each one of those we want to, whichever one it's corresponding to, we want to open the locked doors. And then, because we want to, make it look good, we want to change the static mesh to the one that we had there before. So just want to get this, and we want to set the static mesh to 0.7a. Boom. All right. So now let's go over this one more time. When the player walks into this box, we want to set our player cast so that we can get it later, and say that we are in interactable range. Now we got a timeline constantly updating saying if we are in interactable range, we want to get that player's cast and say can we use an item, which can use item should be defaulted to true. It is not. You should always be able to interact with an item. And then if we can interact with an item, we want to set, if we can interact with an item and we have interacted with that item, we want to set can use item and use item to false. And basically we do this because we don't want you interacting with anything else. I'm just cleaning this up right now. We don't want to interact with anything else, so we block them from being able to do that. There we go. Much better. And then we want to, down here, well, it's going to, when you walk out, it's going to reset can use, you know, and set them back to their default states. Alrighty, and with that being said, this should also be done. So if I come over here and I interact, this changes and the door's open. Maybe we don't want this door to open so wide. Oh, doesn't matter. But maybe we don't want this door to open so wide, so we move this in. So we go over to our locked doors, we go over to the left one, and we pull this in a bit, and then all of a sudden this door doesn't open so wide. Let's pull it in even further. Boom. So without going into your matinee and having to change your keys and their values and what they are, you can just come in and move a single item, and that will change how your doors open. But it also changes how these doors open. And remember, I already set this that this would be interacting with this door from this. So it's going to interact with locked door 1, and that's why we numbered these, so it's easier to keep track. This is 0, this is 1. So if I were to duplicate this again and put another door here, and remember, in our key for locked doors, it's getting all the actors of the locked door type, and we're indexing them so that we can access them here. We're going to grab the door too. We'll grab the wall too. And we're going to put them here. And this is also a good way to put your keys and your doors in very different spots in the level, because they interact with each other. So in this one, this is door 2. So we want this to interact with door 2. And just like that, we have a whole new door set up, and we didn't have to do any work but duplicate. So we come back out here, I'm going to full screen this, and we interact with this door, and boom, we got a door that opens. We come up here, interact with this one, boom, we got a door that opens. And we come up here, we got interact with this one, we got a door that opens. And also, if we stand here, the door's closed. Now the doors will open again because I walked away, but that's because nothing is telling them that it's okay to stay closed. In my case, the elevators are going to be at the end of the level. So what you could do is, in the locked doors, you could, after they have closed, add another variable saying maybe level complete. And if level complete is true, which we default it to false, then when the player, so say you have another actor inside of the box trigger that is the actual elevator that, say, moves down once the player's done, and this doesn't. We don't want the doors to open back up the second we start to leave the box. So we just want to do a check and say if the player has left the box trigger, we want to stop checking here or stop doing this, and we also want to say, but also, is the level completed? Because if the level's completed and the doors are completely closed, then we don't want to open them up again. So if the level is complete, then don't. But if it's not, then do. Not sure what happened there. So what we want to do is, if the player leaves that box, we don't want the doors to open again once they've completely closed. So once the doors are closed and the move to is completed, we want to add a variable called doors closed, so we don't open them again. And we just want to set that to true. Compile. And then we want to say if doors closed is true, then we don't want to open the doors again, which means we only want them to open if it's false. So let's come back out here. We'll save everything and just maximize. So I come here, boom, this door opens. I come here, this door opens, and you can use them as regular doors, but you can also, like I said, use them as elevator doors, and then boom, and then you move out and the doors stay closed. And these stayed open because I did not stay inside of the box trigger that was checking. But if I leave too soon, obviously there's still a few bugs in in the programming. But hopefully this was some kind of helpful to you. Obviously, if I run from the doors from the other side, then they just open. But these are meant to be entered from one direction. So I hope this was helpful to you. Leave a like, subscribe. I might be doing more tutorials in the future. Obviously, I have some ideas about things that I could make tutorials on. Maybe weapon animation, custom, attack animations, equipping and de-equipping weapons, AI, fighting AI, things like that. I'm still learning a lot of things, and I'm once I get a good grip on it, then I'll do a tutorial. But there's a lot here. I hope you learned something, and you'll take it with you, in learning new things. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later.